Greetings, I'm Toglin, Hell's Harlequin, but you may call me Tog. So I recently saw the Barbie movie, and it made me sad. As long as you don't mind spoilers, relax in your Mojo Dojo Casa house and grab a brewski beer and let's get right into it. This movie is a good example of the gender empathy gap. If you're new to that term, it's the idea that both men and women lack empathy towards men. A classic example is, I went to a bar and there was a woman crying in the bathroom and all the women tried to comfort her even though none of them knew the details of her situation. If we saw a man crying in a public place, it's likely we would avoid him and possibly judge him over that type of unmanly display. Despite what the right would try and make you believe, the gender empathy gap is apolitical. Both sides will pay lip service to the various sides of male issues, but both sides perpetuate the gender empathy gap in their own ways. The roles of men and women used to be fixed. Women were seen as a delicate resource and men have been viewed as a replaceable cog in the machine. Male disposability is directly tied to the gender empathy gap. Over the years, women's roles are no longer static. Women have been given the liberty to branch out and involve themselves in classically male positions. Men, however, have not been given the same level of flexibility. The right makes promises to young men on how classic masculinity is the key to male happiness. If we could return to a society where men and women would go back to their rightful place, the world would be back to an idyllic utopia in which men are happy. The truth is that world never existed. The right alienates feminine men and criticizes men who want a more flexible role in society as demasculated. At this point, you might be thinking, Sir Tog, what does any of this have to do with the Barbie movie? I promise, we are getting there. The Barbie movie is an example of how the left views disregarding men's feelings as not passive and misguided, but as an actual virtue. I didn't take Ben Shapiro's open criticisms of the movie seriously because that guy is basically a living meme. He sounds like an old man yelling at the clouds. He sees wokeness everywhere. That man thinks the female orgasm is woke and it's normal for a woman to be as dry as the Sahara Desert. So I went in with an open mind, hoping for a mind-bending, surreal acid trip. Don't get me wrong, you do get that, but it's seasoned with a side of misandry. When we first meet Ken, he seems really sweet and absolutely adores Barbie. She brushes off all of his advances despite confirming that they are boyfriend and girlfriend. I at first laughed this off as a joke, dealing with Barbie and Ken's sexlessness. As the movie continued, we see her mistreatment of him only increase. She is extremely patronizing and dismissive towards him. When we go to the human world, we can see the extent of how much of second-class citizens the Kens are. Ken is shocked when people give him any positive attention. He sees a world in which men are able to hold positions of power and decides to bring patriarchy to the Barbie world. The Kens create a world of their desires where the Barbies give them genuine human affection. They are free to drink their brewski beers, they get to listen to the music that they want to listen to, watch the movies they want to watch, and actually sleep in houses. For context, Barbie is asked where the Kens live, and she says she has no idea. This is a demonstration on how the gender empathy gap is not only not taken seriously, it's seen as a joke. I theorize all the Kens sleep in a box on the beach. One thing that really rubbed me the wrong way was that Barbie and her new human friend were talking about how useless the Kens are and how when she was a little girl she never even owned a Ken. Instead of traditional disposability like what the right pushes, the left views men as obsolete. I also find it odd that when men have a desire for companionship, feminists tend to view men as entitled for wanting female attention. But to be fair, they also think that women who want male attention are brainwashed. Speaking of brainwashing, the Barbies were only giving the Kens attention because they were brainwashed by the newly introduced patriarchy. After being brought back to their senses, the Barbies conspire to commit voter fraud to keep the Kens from changing the Constitution. They intentionally make the Kens jealous by flirting with the other Kens while they are all on the beach singing the song Push by Matchbox 20 for 4 straight hours. It's rather ironic when you think about it because the song is about the lead singer's abusive ex-girlfriend. Anyways, I really didn't like the implication that jealousy is a masculine trait. It's a human trait, not unique to either sex. It does lead into the best part of the movie, which is the Ken War, a battle with a song and a choreographed dance number. If you purposefully set out to make a large group of women jealous, you could accomplish it just as easily. I doubt that it would lead to an all-out brawl. Women tend to be more subtle. They get revenge typically through rumors and other forms of bullying. Once the Barbies came back into power, they reinstated the matriarchy and the Kens got practically nothing. They don't even get houses. One of the Kens asked if they could be on the Supreme Court. The Barbies just laughed at him, saying that it's too big of a role for a Ken. He can be part of a minor court instead. The movie tells us that because we don't have gender equality in the real world, the Kens will have to be treated as badly as women. Let's really dissect this. We have had a woman on the Supreme Court for the last 40 years. We also have a woman vice president. I'm not going to pretend that sexism towards women doesn't exist, but it's nowhere near the extent that the Kens face. Were traditional values patriarchal? Yes, they were. At this point, you may ask me, Sir Tog, wouldn't that make traditionalism the same as patriarchy? No. Like Orwell said in the book 1984, the power of language is able to control the mind, which is the center of a human being. Patriarchy carries an implied anti-male bias, even when you hear that the patriarchy can also hurt men by keeping them in a small box. It has the implication that all men's issues are men's fault. Scholarly feminists will argue that men and women partook in the patriarchy, so it's a social construct. The thing is, patriarchy is too loosey-goosey of a word to have any real meaning. Each individual feminist puts different things they find questionable into the patriarchy box. Going to church, getting married, playing impact sports, drinking beer, or even watching porn all go into the patriarchy box depending who you ask. One thing I also want to add about traditional values and gender roles is I have no desire to follow them or completely dismantle them. Some people find fulfillment in stereotypical roles. When Ken brought in the patriarchy with them, the Kens started acting like frat boys and dressing in rocker headbands with lots of bling and wrestling belts. The movie gave the impression machismo is strictly performative. People on the far left are willing to accept that there are femboys with 50 pairs of heels and not one pair of hiking boots, but they will judge a manly man who just wants to watch sports, go fishing, and hang out with the boys. We are told men are only extremely masculine out of societal conformity. Yet they don't hold the same standard over hyperfemininity. You can be a total girl boss head to toe in pink. The end of the movie is what I found most heart-wrenching. We have Ken open up to Barbie about how she was emotionally neglecting him. He really didn't care about the patriarchy because it's not really about men and horses. He was just trying to get her to notice him. Does she really have to have a girls' night every night? He just wants her to give some attention. She tells him it's good he's crying and sharing his feelings, but he can't define himself by his relationship. In isolation, that statement is good advice, but the thing is, she is his girlfriend. If we are to go by the Barbie timeline, they have been together for 60 years. There was an implied breakup earlier in the movie, but that could be interpreted as just a couple's fight. When he commandeered her house, he said they could share if they lived together as a couple. She just walked away. She mistreated him, and that's why he became the antagonist. She and the other Barbies took zero accountability for the suffering of the Kens and being the source of their uprising. She tells him he is enough, he just takes it, and we are to assume that it is a happy ending because the Kens act happy. The truth is, they didn't get a happy ending. It was the equivalent of, man up and don't bother women with your emotions. The only difference between that message and the one they would define as toxic masculinity is they allow men to cry about their problems, and there is an assumption that that is all guys need in order to get over it. If we swapped genders and had a woman whose partner neglects her and treats her like a child, he would be seen as toxic and possibly abusive. Anyone in a relationship is entitled to their partner's time. It's part of the social contract that defines a romantic relationship. Being with someone that is emotionally neglectful would tear down anyone's self-worth. Them saying, well, find your own self-worth, washes their hands of personal responsibility as a toxic partner. Ken didn't have a good support system, so it would have been nice to see someone in his corner tell him he should leave her because she takes him for granted. People like to say this movie was man-hating, but I would say it was more toxically apathetic rather than completely hateful. You might be wondering why it's been so long since I've done men's rights content. The internet has the attention span of a gnat, and it's no longer vogue to talk about the MRM. Most of the spaces I used to lurk are now filled with incels, but this movie sparked something in me, so I had to talk about it. Those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I wish all of you a pleasant rest of your day. And despite what the world may say, all of you are Kenuff.